Some recent new polls reveal who Democrats believe are the most electable candidates and what a winning candidate looks like to the party. And also, as Biden digs in, one of his opponents in the race takes a stand.
Team Rising is here. Kristen Hawn is a Democratic strategist. She spent more than 5 years as the communications director and chief political advisor for the Blue Dog Coalition. Jack Kingston is a former Republican congressman in Georgia, previously served as a senior advisor for the Trump campaign. Welcome to you both.
Great to see you both.
Thank you.
So we have an interesting new poll out from an outfit called Avalanche Strategies, and they say if the primary election were today, which candidate would you vote for? 29% say Joe Biden, 17% Bernie Sanders, 16% Elizabeth Warren, and 13% Buttigieg. But if that is flipped, they ask, can you make any of the candidates president without beating anyone or winning the election? 21% say Elizabeth Warren. Kristen, does this indicate that it's electability and the aura of electability around Joe Biden is the only thing that's really propelling people towards his candidacy?
I wouldn't say the only thing. I mean, he's a strong candidate. He's the former vice president of the United States of America. There are a lot of reasons why I think a lot of people support him. Although there is this new question, which is why I think this poll is so interesting, you know, the electability. And there are a lot of people who are taking a look at, you know, the swath of candidates on the Democratic side. And, you know, I think I said this on the show last time I was on. As a woman, I wish that there were, you know, more women that I could get behind in the race. But at the end of the day, I want the person who's the most electable. So I think it's a really interesting something that's coming into play this time around. We just want to beat Trump.
Yeah, well, and Congressman, I mean, we were talking a little offset. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's initial move with the DNA testing and the whole Native American thing, I think really raised a lot of questions for people about whether she would be the person to beat Donald Trump. And so even though people like her, I think anyone would say she's since that point been running a great campaign, a very substantive campaign, whatever you think of the ideas. She's been very specific. She's been out front with policy. People are really responding to that. And the question in their mind, though, is this the person who could beat Donald Trump?
You know, and I don't think anybody really knows the answer to it. It's interesting. The Avalanche polling firm usually works with the very liberal groups like NARAL and pro-choice groups, AFL-CIO. And in this particular poll, the sample, I believe, was an oversample of Democrats. It was about 1,100 Democrats and about 600 Republicans. And interestingly, 143 people who don't vote. I don't know why you would ask them about electability. I think that she's doing better, though, because of the exact reason you're saying. She's actually the only Democrat candidate who's putting out details, proposals with some originality.
Yeah.
And so unlike so many of them who are just always, I'm not Trump, I hate Trump, did I tell you I'm not Trump? Elizabeth Warren is saying that, but she's also saying, here's my economic plan, and here's what I would do about income inequality and the Green New Deal type
Tucker Carlson
issues.
likes some of her plans. How about that?
He does.
Kristen, one thing I've looked at, too, is that Elizabeth Warren might have tactically played this better than Bernie Sanders, branding her plan economic patriotism, still saying she's a capitalist, but proposing much of the exact same things that Bernie would do in practice. Do you think it was a mistake for Bernie to call himself a socialist and to double down on that label, while Elizabeth Warren is proposing essentially the same stuff, but with a better strategy?
Yes, I think so. And I think a recent CAP poll, Center for American Progress, put out a poll saying to label yourself as a socialist is dangerous as far as electability goes among Democrats. So this is a left, you know, not center left, a left organization.
But they're also like Hillary Clinton's think tank. Let's just put that out.
That's true, but just in general, I think it was smart, to your question, it was smart for her to come out and when asked the question, are you a capitalist? Yes, with these rules. And I just don't think people want a socialist, even Democrats. I don't think by and large.
I don't think between AOC and Bernie they're going to be able to carry the socialist banner, but I think what they're going to do is put a lot of the candidates that you consult with on the spot. Are you a capitalist or a socialist? And for many of them, it's going to be an easy answer. And as once enough say, I'm a capitalist, I think then you're going to have, we're over socialism.
Guess what, guys? The Republicans are going to call them all socialists.
It's
anyway.
true.
Which is what Bernie says.
You think we will?
Yeah.
Never.
I want to move on to Biden, but first on this one issue, Kristen, I wanted to get your specific thoughts of whether Elizabeth Warren's gender is also part of questions around her electability. I mean, a lot of people took from Hillary Clinton's failure in 2016. I don't agree with this perspective. A lot of people said, well, she's a woman, and that misogyny is so deep, that's part of why she didn't get elected. Are they applying that lesson to the women in the field now and saying, well, maybe that makes them unelectable?
I actually think Democrats, I can't remember where I was reading this, but Democrats want a woman candidate. So I actually think it's the reverse. I mean, I think that, at least on our side of the aisle, we want the right woman, but I think it might be helping her because, we see, I think that you can't have an all-male ticket on the Democratic side, period.
And this same poll actually showed Republicans right now are more excited than Democrats. Democrats are a little angrier and more frustrated, but the excitement factor and the candidate that brings out that excitement is going to win. And, I just want to point out on the electability topic that Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Jimmy Carter were not the early odds-on electable candidates. Right. They were the ones who eventually came up with the message, the charm, the connection, the story that the American people wanted to hear.
Right. Well, we should point out in this, there's I think this is an LA Times poll, right, folks, that said that 56% on the Democratic side said they believe the best bet in terms of electability would be a white male candidate. So I think there may be more to the gender concerns than we want to admit. But speaking of white male candidates, Joe Biden, he had a fundraiser recently, as he does with a lot of very wealthy individuals, as politicians do. And he made a few comments that were eyebrow raising, but in particular, he really waxed nostalgic about his time being able to work with virulent racist segregationists who fought for abhorrent things and said abhorrent things, and has really, even though he's been, struck a nerve, a lot of people didn't like what he had to say, he's really doubled down, refused to apologize. Let's take a listen to a little bit of the former vice president.
The point I'm making is you don't have to agree. You don't have to like the people in terms of their views, but you just simply make the case and you beat them. You beat them without changing the system.
Kristen, what do you think of how the vice president is handling this, and is this indicative of kind of broader problems for him?
I think those are maybe two different questions. I think that some people are saying that he's out of touch with the party. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not saying that I'm defending, his example, but I also believe that he was talking about the need for people to come together and actually work together no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, no matter how abhorrent you might think somebody is. And he picked the most difficult thing he had to do and the most difficult people he had to work with. And those were, people he vehemently disagreed with on this horrible, thing. And he was still able to come together with them. Now, how he delivered it, and we know how he, tends to commit some of these gaps and how they handled it in the follow-up to it. That's a different matter. But I
Cory
think
Booker
his intention
came after him, and he said Cory's the one who should apologize.
That's the follow-up I'm
next
talking
level.
about. I'm not sure. If you're going to respond, you shote have come out and clarified. He did clarify, but
why?
A lot of the candidates are jumping on the bandwagon. I think Mayor Pete was probably the smartest. Let everybody else go in and attack the vice president.
Well, he's not in a great position now because he's dealing with his own situation back home.
It makes him, but also, I think it makes him. The bigger problem is because I don't think it's going to stick that Joe Biden is racist. It makes him actually just look older.
Well, I think that's
a
more
problem,
the thing.
and I think that is a problem.
Eastland, I believe, died or got out of the Senate in 1978. And Herman Talmadge was defeated by Mac Mattingly in 1980. Now, I need to point out both these gentlemen are Democrats.
Yes.
And so it's particularly odd that a Democrat would, highlight the Democrat racism. But I do think it does show he's old. Do you remember when Bob Dole was running against Bill Clinton and he talked about the Brooklyn Braves? And it wasn't, an unforgivable gaffe. It just showed huge generational differences between Mayor Pete and Joe Biden or whoever.
It's kind of like Trump and Mayor Pete when he went on.
Alfred Newman. I had to Google it too. I was like, I don't know.
I knew what it was, but it was, that he left two sentences and they just.
I showed a young woman the Will Rogers statue in the Capitol yesterday, and she said she'd never heard of Will Rogers.
Oh my God.
Well, Congressman, you're from the Deep South. I mean, we're grappling with this legacy. How is it that you think that Joe Biden and many of the people there would look upon his comments?
I think I think they're going to just say, well, this is Joe just running his mouth, and if you wait another week, he'll say something else wrong. And if he's number one, as he is in all the polls, everybody in the primary is going to attack him for anything he says. But fortunately for them, he'll say something dumb again. But I do agree with Kristen that the best thing to do is say, listen, I've worked with very difficult people. We had huge philosophical differences, but we put America first, and we did what was best for the country. And if he would say that's all he had to say.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I know.
he's great without a teleprompter for my party.
And it's funny because his own advisors are coming out in the Washington Post and Politico saying, look, we
told
tried.
him not
He won't
to.
stop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty weird. We're 17 months out and we already have internal leaks about how the candidate won't listen.
It's his answer to President Trump's tweets.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, I want to be a freelance guy and say
That's
what I
exactly
Well,
want.
I think it
That's
also
exactly
gives us
what
a
it
little
is.
insight into their strategy of keeping him very scarce.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there you go.
Well, and Elizabeth Warren said how she would take the opposite tack, that, you know, when you have a president like this, you have to just fight him. And yes, you do have to fight back against some of these things, but you also have to work together. Look at Dick Durbin and Jared Kushner on prison reform.
Right.
You know,
Good point.
so.
Yeah. Ted Cruz last year worked with Ed Markey on a backup bill for the GPS, an extremely important bill. Joe Kennedy and Marsha Blackburn did a very important over-the-counter hearing aid bill. There's a lot of bipartisanship that goes across a philosophical spectrum, doesn't get covered by the press because it's not a food fight.
But we cover it here, don't we?
We do.
Tucker?
You do.
Sure, except for the health.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for
Appreciate
joining us.
it.
Thanks.
Coming up, a 9/11 first responder who took his fight to Capitol Hill last week continues to fight for his life.
And food shaming at the office. I am myself an offender. I'll maybe rethink this one. And my team won the Congressional Women's Baseball game, softball game. Very excited about that. We'll tell you about how those stories when Rising continues.